The silver light of a crescent moon hangs low over the humid marshes of the Carolinas, casting long, distorted shadows that dance like ghosts against the towering cypress trees. You are listening to the Ink of History, and today we embark on a journey through the dark corridors of the past. So please consider subscribing to our channel if you wish to continue uncovering the hidden truths of human endurance. Beneath the silence of the night, a group of weary travelers moves with a precision that defies the chaos of their circumstances. They are not merely fleeing. They are navigating a celestial map written in the shifting phases of the lunar cycle. For the enslaved people of the American South, the night was not a blanket of darkness but a sophisticated tool of liberation, a secret language spoken in the rhythm of the tides and the glow of the heavens. We ask ourselves how a population systematically deprived of formal education managed to outmaneuver the most ruthless trackers of their generation. The answer lies in a strategy so subtle it escaped the notice of their oppressors for decades, buried in the lore of the Underground Railroad. To understand the genius of this escape, we must step back into the suffocating reality of the mid-19th century. The institution of slavery in the United States was a machine designed to crush the human spirit, utilizing not only physical shackles but a constant surveillance apparatus intended to keep the population in perpetual fear. Slave catchers, armed with hounds and an intimate knowledge of the terrain, patrolled the forests and swamps, acting as the enforcers of a brutal economic system. The enslaved, however, possessed a resource the masters could never command: an intrinsic connection to the natural world. They observed the patterns of the wilderness, learning to read the sky as a sailor reads a compass. When the moon was full, the woods were alive with an ethereal brightness that allowed for rapid movement, yet it also exposed the runaway to prying eyes. Conversely, when the moon waned to a sliver, the darkness provided cover, but the difficulty of navigation increased exponentially. This was the core of their tactical dilemma. Elijah was one such navigator, a man whose quiet resolve and mastery of the celestial clock earned him a reputation among the clandestine networks in Virginia. He understood that the Underground Railroad was not a singular path of iron and stone, but a fluid, living entity that shifted its arteries based on the lunar phase. When the sky was void of light, Elijah and his small group would follow the North Star, that fixed beacon that remained their constant guide regardless of the moon's whims. But on nights when the moon bloomed in the sky, they would alter their strategy entirely, retreating into the dense, flooded cane brakes where the water neutralized their scent and the shimmering light rendered human silhouettes indistinguishable from the swaying foliage. The slave catchers were often superstitious men, prone to avoiding the deep swamps during the full moon, fearing the spectral legends that thrived in the marshland. Elijah used this fear to his advantage, turning the very myths that were meant to keep his kin in check into a shield of invisibility. The strategy of the Underground Railroad was never about a straight line. It was a series of calculated adjustments. We often envision the escape as a desperate dash, but the historical record suggests a far more methodical operation. Information was passed through coded songs, the lyrics changing to reflect the safest time to depart based on the lunar calendar. When the drinking gourd appeared in the northern sky, or when the moon reached its zenith, certain routes became active. These were the moments when the network was most alert, when safe houses prepared their basements and hidden lofts for the arrival of weary souls. The reliance on the moon was also a rhythmic synchronization. It allowed groups to coordinate across vast distances without ever meeting, effectively creating a decentralized movement that had no single leader to capture and no central headquarters to raid. This was the brilliance of the enslaved. They turned the sky itself into a distributed intelligence network. As Elijah and his fellow travelers moved through the dense undergrowth, they had to contend with the biting cold and the constant threat of discovery. The environment was their greatest ally and their most treacherous enemy. The sound of a snapping twig could trigger a hunt, and the barking of dogs in the distance was a sound that haunted their dreams. Yet, Elijah kept his eyes fixed on the shifting light. He knew that the moon's cycle governed not only the tides of the Atlantic but the flow of human misery and hope. During the waxing moon, the group would rest, buried deep within the earth or hidden beneath the floorboards of sympathetic farmers, waiting for the shadows to lengthen. They practiced a silent, rigorous endurance, eating only what the forest provided and speaking in whispers that barely stirred the humid air. They were ghosts moving through a land that insisted they were property. The slave catchers, for their part, relied heavily on their dogs and their mastery of horse-mounted patrols. They operated under the assumption that the runaways would move in straight lines toward northern cities, lacking the sophistication to handle the complex map of the wilderness. This hubris was their undoing. They searched the roads and the well-trodden paths, while beneath the canopy of trees, men like Elijah were trekking through water, utilizing the reflection of the moonlight on the surface of the swamps to discern the path ahead. The moon was a guide that never betrayed them, a source of light that required no fuel and made no sound. They knew the constellations as intimately as a mother knows the face of her child, and in this intimacy, they found a map to freedom that no overseer could ever read. It is essential to recognize that this was not merely a survival tactic. It was an act of profound intellectual resistance. By mastering the natural world, the enslaved reclaimed a sense of autonomy that the system sought to extinguish. They were not merely fleeing toward a destination. They were engaging in a strategic military campaign of attrition. The slave catchers were constantly exhausted, their resources drained, while the underground networks grew more efficient with every passing season. This realization fundamentally changed the power dynamic of the South. It was no longer a simple matter of master and servant, but a clash between a rigid, outdated social structure and a highly motivated, adaptive resistance movement. The moon, in its impartial, recurring phases, provided the architecture for this liberation. We must also consider the role of the women in these journeys, who often carried the weight of the group's survival in ways that history has frequently overlooked. They were the keepers of the oral tradition, mapping the routes through song and storytelling. Elizabeth, a woman who traveled in Elijah's contingent, utilized the memory of the stars to ensure that no one was left behind in the confusion of the night. She understood that the moon cycle was also linked to the cycles of the harvest, and she knew exactly when the farmers would be preoccupied with their fields, providing a window of vulnerability in the surveillance network. Her knowledge of the flora, of which plants provided medicinal aid and which provided sustenance, allowed the group to persist where others would have perished. She was the anchor of their hope, ensuring that the physical labor did not crush their resolve. As the years of the conflict intensified, the methods became increasingly sophisticated. What began as individual escapes evolved into coordinated movements. The Underground Railroad developed a structure of signal fires, silent mountain paths, and maritime routes that utilized the lunar rhythm to time the departure of ships from coastal points. When the tide was high and the moon was obscured, boats could navigate the narrow inlets of the coast, moving cargo of human freight toward the possibility of a new life. This was the strategic pinnacle of the resistance, a seamless integration of celestial timing and local knowledge. Every phase of the moon served a unique purpose, and every purpose served the singular goal of human liberty. However, we must reflect on the cost of this liberty. Not everyone made it. The swamps were deep, the winters were harsh, and the slave catchers were relentless. The history of the Underground Railroad is also a history of trauma, of families torn apart and lives extinguished in the quest for the basic right to own one's own body. We recount these stories not to romanticize the struggle, but to honor the resilience of those who faced impossible odds. The silence of the night, which provided such vital cover, also bore witness to the suffering of those who fell along the way. Their memory is woven into the very earth they traversed, a permanent scar on the landscape of progress. As the narrative of the Civil War began to take shape, the groundwork laid by these clandestine lunar navigators became increasingly visible. The knowledge they gathered, the paths they scouted, and the networks they established provided a blueprint for the resistance that would eventually challenge the institution of slavery on a national scale. The slave catchers, once confident in their dominance, found themselves outplayed by a population they had systematically underestimated. The moon, once a silent observer, became the primary witness to the crumbling of an empire built on the back of human misery. The strategy was clear: leverage the natural order against the artificial order of the oppressor. Today, when we look at the history of the United States, we often see the grand gestures and the political decisions of the elite. Yet, The true story of emancipation is found in the dirt, the swamps, and the starlit nights of the 19th century. It is the story of people like Elijah and Elizabeth, who used the very heavens to rewrite their destiny. It is a story that requires us to reconsider what we think we know about power, intelligence, and the nature of freedom. Why does history so often neglect the genius of the marginalized? Perhaps because acknowledging it requires us to confront the systemic failures of our own society. When we ask what we can learn from their struggle, we are led to the conclusion that resilience is not an accidental trait. It is a cultivated, strategic response to oppression. The legacy of these lunar-guided escapes persists in the cultural memory of those who recognize that the quest for equality is a continuous loop, much like the phases of the moon. It is never truly finished. There are always new frontiers, new systems of inequality to navigate, and new maps to draw. The fight for human dignity is a cumulative effort, built on the foundations laid by those who came before us. We must ask ourselves if we are prepared to engage in the same level of strategic thinking to address the injustices of our own time. Are we willing to look past the surface of our reality to understand the deeper forces that govern our lives? The path to progress is rarely direct. It is marked by pivots, retreats, and the necessity of reading the signs of the times. As we conclude this exploration, consider the weight of the title, The Moonlit Path to Freedom. It suggests a movement that is both illuminated and obscured, a journey that requires both the light of knowledge and the protection of secrecy. It is a reminder that the most significant transformations in human history often happen in the quiet, overlooked spaces, away from the glare of official records. The enslaved individuals who utilized the lunar cycle were not just seeking a physical escape. They were enacting a philosophy of liberation. They proved that even in the darkest of circumstances, there are patterns to be found, strategies to be employed, and a beacon of hope to be followed. If this investigation into the shadows of our shared history has moved you, please consider visiting our archives for more deep dives into the hidden struggles that shaped our world. Supporting this channel allows us to continue bringing these forgotten narratives into the light, ensuring that the legacy of those who fought for freedom is never lost to the passage of time. The moon continues to rise and set, its phases as constant as the human desire for justice. Let its light be a reminder that even when the path is difficult and the night seems endless, there is always a way forward for those who dare to observe, to plan, and to act. The struggle for human rights is a long walk through history, and we are all part of the journey. Take a moment to reflect on the stories we have shared today and consider how the endurance of these individuals continues to echo in the halls of justice. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the ink of our past. Until we meet again in the next chapter of our exploration, keep looking for the truth in the shadows. Yet, to leave the narrative here, at the threshold of the known, would be to ignore the profound complexities that still pulse beneath the soil of our contemporary understanding. The Moonlit Path was never merely a singular route. It was a sprawling, decentralized network of survival that transcended time and geography. When we speak of the pursuit of liberty, we are often tempted to visualize it as a linear progression from point A to point B, a march toward a horizon of emancipation. But history, when examined closely, reveals itself to be more like a complex, subterranean root system, where the true strength of the movement lay in its ability to remain unseen, anchored by collective wisdom rather than individual recognition. Consider the intricate technology of the night itself. For those navigating the dense forests and the treacherous swamplands of the antebellum South, the darkness was not a void to be feared. It was a canvas upon which a new reality was being written. The reliance on celestial navigation, on the North Star and the rhythmic pull of the tides, represented a profound communion with the natural world that stood in stark contrast to the rigid, manufactured hierarchies of their captors. This was an ancient knowledge, reclaimed and repurposed as a tactical advantage. Every shift in the wind, every rustle of the leaves, became a signal, a wordless communication that served as a map for the desperate. By observing the lunar phases, these individuals were doing more than simply timing a journey. They were synchronizing their survival with the very pulse of the universe. We must also broaden our gaze to include the silent architects of this movement, the people who never stepped onto the path themselves but who held the lanterns of support from behind closed doors. The history of freedom is often told through the eyes of the runner, but it was sustained by the whispers and the coded messages of those who provided sanctuary. Think of the hidden compartments, the secret floorboards, and the quiet agreements made over kitchen tables that flickered with the low light of a dying coal. These were the true nodes of the network. They knew that the price of their complicity was the ultimate penalty, yet they chose the weight of that moral responsibility over the ease of convenience. Their contribution reminds us that the struggle for human rights is rarely a solo endeavor. It is, and always has been, a collaborative act of defiance against systemic cruelty. As we delve deeper into the mechanics of this resistance, we find that communication was the most potent weapon in their arsenal. The use of song, the spirituals that doubled as topographic guides, is a testament to the ingenuity of the human spirit. A melody that seemed, to the untrained ear, to be a humble expression of faith was, in fact, an encrypted manual for escape. These songs carried instructions on which waterways to follow, where to find food, and how to evade the patrols that prowled the borders. By turning their culture into a code, the enslaved built an infrastructure of information that moved faster and more reliably than the official dispatches of the state. This is a vital lesson for us today. When the mechanisms of truth are suppressed, the people will always find a way to encode the reality of their existence into the very fabric of their daily rituals. The echo of this ingenuity persists in our modern digital landscape, where the shadows have simply migrated from the physical woods to the vast, unseen corridors of the internet. Today, we face a different kind of darkness, one characterized by the overwhelming noise of information and the subtle erosion of privacy. Yet, the imperative remains identical: the need to observe, to plan, and to act. When we peel back the layers of our modern society, we see that the battle between transparency and concealment is still being fought. We are currently navigating a digital moonlit path, discerning the difference between legitimate knowledge and the calculated distractions designed to keep us from seeing the fundamental truths of our power structures. The same vigilance required by those who walked the path of the stars is required of us as we navigate the complexities of power, surveillance, and human agency in the 21st century. To understand the scope of this struggle, we must also confront the uncomfortable reality of what was lost. The archives of history are notoriously incomplete, often serving the interests of those who held the pen. The stories of those who failed to reach the end of the path, or whose contributions were erased by the passage of time, are just as much a part of this heritage as the celebrated icons of resistance. We owe it to the silent majority of the past to continue searching for their voices in the margins of ledgers, in the gaps between birth and death records, and in the oral traditions that have miraculously survived through generations. Every fragment of evidence we recover is a victory against the historical erasure that was intended to be the final word on their lives. Looking toward the future, we should consider what this history demands of us in our current moment. The struggle for justice is not a static object to be admired in a museum. It is a living process. It requires us to cultivate the same level of discernment that allowed our predecessors to navigate the night. We are called upon to listen to the signals beneath the noise, to identify the quiet spaces where change is being nurtured, and to recognize that the most impactful shifts in our society are often those that occur in the periphery of our attention. The institutions that define our lives, our laws, our economic systems, our cultural narratives, are not immutable. They are dynamic constructs that reflect our collective will. If we find that they no longer serve the cause of justice, then we, like those who once walked by the light of the moon, have the responsibility to pivot, to plan new routes, and to demand a reality that reflects our inherent and equal humanity. Furthermore, we must address the psychological endurance that this path required. To live in constant anticipation of danger, to calibrate one's life around the phases of the celestial bodies, and to hold the promise of freedom as a secret, sacred anchor. This required a profound form of mental fortitude. This was not merely physical survival. It was the maintenance of the soul against a system designed to strip it away. By asserting their agency in the dead of night, they were essentially declaring that their humanity belonged to them, and not to the structures that claimed to own them. This assertion of selfhood in the face of absolute negation is the cornerstone of all human rights movements. It is the refusal to internalize the logic of the oppressor, no matter how pervasive that logic may appear to be. We find ourselves today in a unique position to honor this legacy by continuing to challenge the systems that thrive on the invisibility of others. Whether it is addressing modern forms of exploitation, advocating for the rights of the marginalized, or simply maintaining our critical faculties in an era of manufactured consent, the spirit of the Moonlit Path is a roadmap for the present. It teaches us that there is power in the shadows, provided that the shadows are occupied by those who are conscious, connected, and committed to a common vision. We are the inheritors of a vast, complex, and often painful history, but we are also the authors of the next chapter. The ink we use, like the signals of the past, will be a testament to what we valued and what we were willing to sacrifice to attain it. As we bring this long reflection to a close, let us not think of these stories as ghosts of a bygone era, but as active participants in our current understanding of the world. The moon continues its cycle, indifferent to the chaos of our political movements, yet constant in its role as a witness to the human drama. Let its recurring cycle be a metaphor for our own resilience. When we feel overwhelmed by the scale of the injustice we observe, let us remember that the most monumental shifts in history were initiated by individuals who felt small, who felt vulnerable, and who felt the suffocating weight of the night. They did not wait for the sun to rise to begin their journey. They found the light they needed within themselves and within the collective agreements they forged in the dark. Take this thought with you as you return to the rhythm of your daily life. Your observation, your planning, and your actions are the threads that weave the tapestry of the future. The path is not always clearly marked, and the dangers are real, but the history of our shared struggle is a promise that no night is absolute. Every silence is an opportunity for a new voice to emerge, and every secret kept for the sake of justice is a seed for a more transparent tomorrow. We are walking through the history of our own making, and the light we follow is the light we choose to create. Thank you for your commitment to this deeper investigation. In a world that often rewards the surface level and the ephemeral, your choice to engage with these hidden narratives is a radical act in itself. It is a commitment to the truth, a refusal to look away, and a recognition that the past is never truly buried. It is alive, it is urgent, and it is waiting for us to understand it so that we may better navigate the path ahead. Keep looking, keep questioning, and keep walking. The journey toward justice is indeed a long one, but it is one that we are all walking together, guided by the wisdom of those who came before us and fueled by the hope of those yet to come. Until our next exploration, remain vigilant in the quiet spaces, for that is where the truth and the future are waiting to be found. The persistence of this journey requires more than just intellectual curiosity. It demands an endurance of the spirit that few are prepared to cultivate. As you step away from the immediate intensity of our discussion, consider the geography of the silence you are re-entering. Often, we perceive silence as an absence, a void where nothing happens, but in the context of historical truth-seeking, silence is the most crowded space of all. It is filled with the echoes of testimonies that were never permitted to be spoken, of documents that were burned before they could be read, and of individuals whose lives were erased from the official chronicles of power. When you walk back into your own life, you are not merely returning to a routine. You are returning to a terrain littered with these invisible monuments. The challenge is to learn how to see them, to recognize the deliberate gaps in the narrative that you are presented with every day. Consider the mechanisms through which history is sanitized for public consumption. There is a precise, practiced craft to the way dominant structures curate our past. They do not necessarily rely on blatant fabrications, though those occur. Rather, they rely on a technique of selective illumination. They focus a brilliant, unwavering spotlight on specific events, figures, and narratives, creating a glare so bright that the surrounding landscape falls into total shadow. By shifting your own focus to those shadowed regions, you engage in a form of intellectual rebellion. You are essentially refusing to accept the lighting plan dictated by those who hold the power to control the stage. This is where the real work of history begins, in the margins, in the footnotes, and in the discrepancies between what is documented in official archives and what is remembered in the oral traditions of the marginalized. Think, for instance, of the way we categorize progress. We are taught to measure historical advancement through the lens of institutional reform, legal declarations, and the actions of singular, monumental leaders. While these elements are undeniably significant, they often obscure the underlying, granular movements of civil society. Progress is rarely a top-down phenomenon. It is almost always a slow accumulation of pressure from below. It is the result of thousands of quiet, private decisions made by ordinary people to refuse cooperation with injustice. It is the teacher who alters their curriculum to include forbidden truths, the archivist who misfiles a document to hide it from a purge, and the neighbor who provides sanctuary when the authorities come knocking. These are the unsung, undocumented, and irrepressible movements that actually tilt the axis of the world. By realizing that you are part of this continuum, you shift your understanding of your own agency. You are not a spectator of history. You are a participant in the fabric-making process of reality. The danger, of course, is that the weight of this realization can lead to paralysis. When you begin to see the vast, systemic nature of the challenges we face, the sheer scale of the deception and the deeply entrenched nature of power can feel paralyzing. You might find yourself questioning whether your small, localized actions can ever hope to counter the momentum of institutionalized misinformation. This is a common and predictable response, a psychological barrier that serves the interests of those who wish for the status quo to remain unchallenged. The antidote to this paralysis is a shift in perspective regarding time. We are conditioned to seek immediate, measurable outcomes. We want the results of our efforts to be visible within a single news cycle or a single fiscal year. But the forces that shape the arc of history operate on a much longer timeline. Think of the ecological principles of slow growth. The most resilient structures in nature are not those that shoot up overnight, but those that develop deep, complex root systems over years of relative obscurity. Your commitment to seeking truth is not a sprint. It is an act of cultivation. You are planting seeds in soil that has been poisoned by propaganda and neglect. It may take years for these seeds to break the surface, and you may never see the forest that eventually grows from your efforts. That is not a failure. That is the nature of systemic change. To be effective, you must embrace the necessity of patience. Cultivate the ability to work without the validation of immediate results, and you will find that you have tapped into a wellspring of resilience that is largely unavailable to those who are tethered to the superficial rhythms of the modern world. Furthermore, we must address the role of empathy in this process. It is easy to view historical events as a series of cold, abstract facts, dates, statistics, and strategic maneuvers. But history is made of human blood, breath, and fear. To truly understand the past, you must allow yourself to connect with the human experience of those who suffered under the weight of injustice. This does not mean indulging in sentimentalism, which can be a form of avoidance, but rather developing a rigorous, disciplined empathy. Attempt to reconstruct the internal reality of someone who had to make a choice under duress. What did they fear? What did they value? What were the limitations of their perspective? When you humanize the historical subject, you strip away the sanitized, heroic narrative that is often imposed upon them. You see them not as icons, but as complex, flawed individuals who were, like you, navigating the shadows as best they could. This practice of humanization also serves as a crucial safeguard against the dehumanization inherent in extremist ideologies. Whenever you see a move to simplify a group of people into a monolith, or to frame an entire narrative as a simplistic battle between absolute good and absolute evil, be wary. Power loves a binary. It loves to divide the world into us and them, hero and villain, victim and oppressor. Reality is almost always far more granular and uncomfortable than that. By resisting the urge to simplify, you preserve your capacity for critical thought. You protect your mind from being colonized by the very systems of control you are trying to analyze. There is also the matter of language. The way we speak about our past shapes our capacity to imagine our future. We are currently living through a crisis of vocabulary. Terms that once held specific, significant meanings have been hollowed out, repurposed, and weaponized to the point of exhaustion. To reclaim the truth, you must be vigilant about the language you use. Do not accept the terminology provided for you. Interrogate it. Ask yourself why certain words are being emphasized, and why others are being systematically erased. When you take the time to refine your own definitions, you are performing a necessary act of intellectual hygiene. You are ensuring that your thoughts are your own, rather than echoes of the messaging that surrounds you. As you move forward, consider the value of collaborative investigation. While the pursuit of truth is a personal responsibility, it is not one that should be performed in isolation. We are social creatures, and our understanding of reality is fundamentally shaped by the consensus we reach with those around us. Create small, trusted circles where you can test your ideas, share your research, and challenge each other's assumptions without the fear of judgment. These pockets of genuine, unfiltered discourse are rare, and they are essential. They act as a laboratory for the kind of society we hope to build, one predicated on open communication, mutual respect, and a shared commitment to the truth, regardless of how inconvenient it may be. Beware, however, of the echo chambers that the digital age has perfected. It is entirely possible to surround yourself with information that confirms your existing biases, reinforcing your sense of being right while blinding you to the shifting reality of the world. To escape this, you must actively seek out the uncomfortable. Read sources that challenge your fundamental premises. Engage with thinkers who approach the problems of the world from perspectives entirely different from your own. Do not do this to win an argument. Do not do this to prepare a rebuttal. Do it to expand your map of the world. The goal is not to be correct. The goal is to be accurate, and accuracy requires a constant, rigorous engagement with the totality of the available evidence, not just the parts that fit neatly into your worldview. As we reach the conclusion of this particular phase of our collaboration, I want to leave you with one final reflection on the nature of courage. We often define courage as the absence of fear, or as a grand, heroic gesture made in the face of certain death. But the courage required for life in the modern world is much quieter and much more sustainable. It is the courage to remain curious when it is easier to be cynical. It is the courage to admit when you are wrong, and the courage to change your mind when the evidence demands it. It is the courage to be a witness, even when no one is watching, and even when your testimony feels totally inconsequential. This is the path of the genuine seeker. It is a path that offers no guarantees of success, no medals for valor, and no certainty of recognition. It is a path of hard work, constant questioning, and frequent disappointment. Yet, it is the only path that leads to authentic freedom. By taking responsibility for your own history, by insisting on the truth in an era of manufactured reality, you are reclaiming the most essential part of your humanity. You are no longer a passive vessel for the narratives of the powerful. You have become an active agent of your own consciousness, a custodian of the collective memory, and a participant in the ongoing, unfinished work of creating a more just and transparent world. Remember that the light you create is not a spotlight, but a lantern. It does not need to illuminate the entire world at once. It only needs to be bright enough to allow you to see where you are placing your next step. The path ahead is long, and the obstacles are many, but you are not walking it alone. Thousands of others, across time and across geography, are walking alongside you, each carrying their own lanterns, each contributing their own small, flickering light to the darkness. When you feel the weight of the silence, remember that it is not empty. It is waiting for your contribution. It is waiting for the sound of your questions, the clarity of your insights, and the persistence of your presence. Continue to walk with this awareness. Do not be discouraged by the complexity of the task, nor by the slow pace of progress. Value the integrity of your process above all else. Every time you choose to look deeper, every time you choose to speak a truth that is unpopular, and every time you choose to build a connection based on honesty rather than convenience, you are pushing back the boundaries of the night. You are contributing to the collective project of survival and enlightenment. The journey is the point, and the truth is the companion that will never abandon you, provided you never abandon your commitment to it. Keep your eyes open, keep your mind sharp, and above all, keep your heart engaged. This is our shared, ongoing labor, and it begins again, every single morning, the moment you decide to wake up and look at the world with fresh eyes. Take this pause not as a termination, but as a transition. You have laid the groundwork, you have sharpened your tools, and you have set your intention. Now, the real work begins in the quiet, unrecorded moments of your own life. Trust the process, trust your own capacity for discernment, and remain open to the unexpected. The truth is not a destination we arrive at. It is an atmosphere we breathe, a practice we cultivate, and a commitment we renew. The silence is finally inviting you back into the fray, and this time you go equipped with a new, more profound understanding of what is at stake. The path is before you, the lantern is in your hand, and the dawn is, as it has always been, a matter of our collective choice. Walk, then, with purpose, with patience, and with the unshakable knowledge that your contribution, however small it may seem, is an essential, permanent mark upon the history of our shared human experience. Until we cross paths again in the pursuit of these deeper truths, hold fast to your clarity and remain, always, a vigilant witness to the world as it truly is. The landscape you now inhabit is not merely a physical space, but a mental architecture built upon the ruins of past illusions. As you step forward, understand that the act of witnessing is not a passive observation. It is a disruptive force. By acknowledging the state of the world without the softening filter of denial, you become a catalyst for a subtle, yet irreversible, shift in the environment around you. The people you encounter will sense a change in the frequency of your attention. They will notice that you are no longer merely reactive, tossed about by the frantic currents of daily discourse, but anchored by a conviction that requires no external validation. This anchors your presence, turning you into a point of stability within the turbulence. Consider the nature of influence. We often mistake it for a grand, visible performance, a loud declaration from a pedestal. Yet, the most profound changes in human history have frequently germinated in the soil of quiet, persistent individual actions. It is the way a person refuses to participate in a lie during a casual conversation, or the way they maintain their composure when provocation is the expected response. These small, deliberate choices form a pattern, a quiet defiance that gradually alters the social fabric. When you choose to see clearly, you create a resonance that others, even those unaware of their own fatigue, will begin to perceive. You are essentially offering a template for a different way of existence, one that prioritizes the health of the intellect and the honesty of the spirit over the hollow rewards of current trends. Yet, this path is not without its friction. As you strip away the layers of pretense, you may find that some aspects of your previous life, the superficial echoes and empty habits, no longer fit. This is the inevitable cost of clarity. To gain a deeper understanding of the world, one must be willing to sacrifice the comfort of being understood by those who prefer the fog. Do not mourn these departures. They are simply the shedding of dead weight. The space you leave behind is not an emptiness to be feared, but a vacuum that will inevitably be filled by deeper connections, more substantial inquiries, and a more authentic sense of self. The individuals who gravitate toward this new clarity will be, by necessity, those who are also seeking to move beyond the surface. Reflect on the nature of courage in this context. It is rarely the absence of fear, but the decision that something else is more significant than any anxiety you might harbor regarding the future. Your task is to remain the architect of your own perception. In an era where information is weaponized and attention is the most harvested commodity, your ability to discern the essential from the trivial is a radical, revolutionary act. Do not allow your focus to be fragmented by the relentless noise of digital distraction. Instead, cultivate the habit of deep, sustained contemplation. Use your time to observe the nuances of human behavior, the subtle currents that drive societal shifts, and the recurring cycles of history that so many seem determined to ignore. As you continue this journey, remember that the most valuable lesson is not a singular, epiphany-driven moment, but the accumulation of insights gained through daily navigation. You are learning to read the world as a complex, living text. There are moments when the patterns become clear, the way power maneuvers, the way empathy is suppressed or ignited, and the way truth struggles to manifest through the cacophony of voices. Hold these realizations closely. They are the tools that will allow you to navigate the complexities that lie ahead. You are moving from a state of being acted upon to a state of being an actor, purposeful and deliberate. Finally, acknowledge the weight of your responsibility. To see clearly is to be forever changed. You cannot return to the comfort of ignorance once the veil has been lifted. This is not a burden to be carried with resentment, but a privilege to be honored with humility. You are participating in a long, unbroken lineage of thinkers, observers, and seekers who have stood where you stand, looking into the same vast expanse of the unknown, and choosing to remain steadfast. Your existence is a testament to the endurance of human curiosity and the irrepressible urge toward truth. The road ahead remains unscripted, and that is as it should be. The unpredictability of the path is what demands your constant vigilance and your deepest creative engagement. As you move forward, keep the lantern of your awareness held high. Do not let the shadows of doubt obscure your progress. The work you do today, in these moments of quiet reflection and deliberate action, resonates far beyond your immediate horizon. It becomes part of the shared legacy of our species, a small but vital anchor for those who will follow. Remain firm in your resolve, remain sharp in your observation, and most importantly, remain true to the clarity you have fought so hard to secure. The world is watching, and it is waiting for the witness who is prepared to speak the truth, simply because it is there to be told. Proceed now with the full weight of your humanity behind you, and the open potential of the future unfolding at every step.